I used to work as an overnight physician covering the isolation wing of a regional hospital during the first year of the pandemic, back when a whole section of the building had been converted almost overnight into a unit specifically for the sickest patients we had. I'd just come back from a short leave, and this was my first full week back on the overnight rotation. I want to walk through exactly what happened that week, in order, because looking back, I don't think I fully understood how strange it all was until I laid it out afterward, start to finish. My shift ran from 8 at night to 8 in the morning, and for most of that first week back, I was essentially the only physician covering the unit overnight, with 2 nurses, an orderly, and 1 member of the overnight custodial staff rounding out the team. At that point, the isolation wing only had 1 patient left, a woman in her early 30s who'd been admitted a couple weeks earlier and was pregnant at the time. Stable, but not improving. Not getting worse either. Just holding steady in that in-between place we saw a lot of during that stretch of the pandemic. The first thing that struck me as odd happened on my second night back, when the custodian pulled me aside near the nurses' station and told me something the previous shift apparently hadn't passed along. He said a family member of our patient had shown up a few days earlier, before I'd returned, and had insisted, repeatedly, that he bring a small item into her room, something they wanted physically placed near her or touched to her, for what they described as good luck and protection. He said he'd resisted at first. It wasn't standard protocol to bring outside objects into an isolation room, but the family had been persistent enough that he'd eventually given in, just to end the conversation, and had quietly done what they asked before returning the item to them afterward. I remember not thinking much of it at the time. Families get anxious. They want to feel like they're doing something, and a small, harmless object brought in and out under supervision wasn't exactly a serious breach. I told him it was fine, thanked him for mentioning it, and went back to my rounds. The patient delivered a few days later, an emergency C-section given her condition, and the baby was immediately moved into our unit's small neonatal isolation section because he was struggling too. That night, it was just me, 2 nurses, the orderly, and the custodian again, the rest of the day team having already gone home. One of my nurses went in fully suited to check on the baby, and about half an hour later, she called me in, and by the time I got there, the baby's vitals were crashing. We worked on that infant for hours, from around 9 that night until almost 3 in the morning, and he didn't make it. I won't pretend that wasn't its own kind of terrible night on its own, the kind every person in that field carries with them. What I want to focus on is what happened after, because that's the part I still can't fully explain. The mother's family came the next morning to collect her and the baby's remains, and by the time I came back for my next overnight shift, the unit was completely empty. No patients at all. My whole team was relieved, genuinely looking forward to an easy night after how brutal the last one had been. Around 9:30, I was sitting down, finally eating dinner I'd brought from home, when I heard one of the nurses scream from somewhere near the ward entrance. I ran out and found 2 dogs lying dead just outside the isolation wing's main doors, blood around their mouths, both of them local strays the staff recognized from around the building for months. There was a 3rd dog there too, one none of us had ever seen before, twisting and thrashing in a way that looked genuinely wrong, not like normal animal panic, before the orderly and custodian finally managed to chase it off the property. We cleaned up, called it in, and went back inside. The backup generator in that unit only powered the areas where patients would normally be to protect the equipment, since the rest of the ward didn't need it with no one admitted. As soon as we finished cleaning, the main lights in the ward went out entirely, leaving just the dim emergency lighting over what used to be the patient's room. We ended up sitting together near that empty room, the 4 of us, because none of us wanted to be alone in that building that night. Through the glass separating the hallway from what had been her room, we watched the lights inside flicker on their own. We heard a bathroom tap running from inside, and then shutting off and running again, several times in a row, in a room that had been empty and unused for over 12 hours. Something moved across the ceiling tiles above the hallway, fast, like someone running along the space above the drop ceiling. The medical equipment still plugged in inside that empty room started switching on and off by itself. I made everyone stay together in sight of each other for the rest of that shift. Nobody slept. When the morning team arrived, we all just quietly went home. That same morning, on my way back, I stopped to grab a few things at a store near my apartment. Walking from where I'd parked to the entrance, I lost my footing on completely flat, dry pavement and went down hard, and a delivery truck passed close enough behind me seconds later, that I genuinely believe if I'd fallen, even slightly differently, I wouldn't be telling you this. I checked the ground afterward. No crack, no debris, nothing that explained the fall. I finished my errand, shaken but functional, and on the drive home, a car ran a stop sign and clipped my back bumper at low speed. Not enough to hurt me, but enough to leave me sitting in my car afterward, trying to process that this was now the second unexplainable near miss of the morning. When I finally pulled into my own driveway, a neighbor's dog, one that had never once acted aggressively toward me in the 2 years I'd lived there, came off its property at a dead sprint straight at me, and I ended up half falling into the flower bed at the edge of my own yard, trying to get away from it before its owner got it back under control. 3 incidents, one morning, and by the time I got inside my apartment, I remember standing in my kitchen thinking, with complete clarity, that something was actively trying to hurt me, and I had no framework at all for what that meant or why. I went to bed exhausted, and had a dream that afternoon I still remember in total detail. In it, a friend of mine had come over to visit, sleeping in my living room while I slept in my bedroom. In the dream, she got up at some point and walked into my room and found a woman standing beside my bed in a pale hospital gown, hair loose and disheveled, staring down at me with an expression of pure fury. The moment my friend and the woman made eye contact, my friend turned and ran, and the woman followed her out of the room. I woke up covered in sweat, genuinely struggling to catch my breath, and within a minute, my phone rang. It was that exact friend, telling me she wanted to come stay at my place for a few days. I told her, without really explaining why, that it wasn't a good time, and got off the phone as quickly as I could, unable to shake the feeling that I'd just watched something that hadn't happened yet. For the following several nights, I couldn't shake the sense that someone was standing just outside my bedroom door. I heard what sounded like knocking, faint, unhurried, at odd hours. Once, I was certain something was watching me through the gap in my bedroom curtains from the small balcony outside, though there was nothing there when I checked. Every plant I owned, healthy up to that point, died within days, all at once, for no reason I could identify. I started noticing a faint, sour smell every time I walked into my apartment that wasn't there before, and that I couldn't trace to any source. I never brought in anyone official to deal with any of it. I didn't know who you were even supposed to call for something like that, and some part of me didn't want to make it more real by treating it as something that needed a formal solution. What I did instead, for whatever it's worth, was simple. I stopped working nights on that unit. I requested a transfer to a different department, which was granted without much question given everything going on in the hospital at that time. And within about 2 weeks of making that change, the feeling in my apartment, the knocking, the smell, all of it, tapered off on its own until it stopped completely. I never found out who that family member was, or what exactly they'd wanted touched to her before she was admitted. I never found out whether any of it was actually connected, the object, the animals, the accidents, the dream, or whether I've simply strung together a series of unrelated bad weeks into a story that feels connected because I needed it to mean something. I only know that I haven't taken another overnight isolation shift since, and that to this day, if a dog runs at me unprovoked, or I hear a tap running in an empty room, some small, stubborn part of my brain still goes back to that week, and I still don't have an answer for any of it.